On show 431, how the Japanese trains are using Tesla batteries to store power, how your used EV can make you money, and a tour of the Mini Electric factory. Those stories and many, many more coming up on today's podcast. Thank you for listening today. My name is Martyn Lee. If you are new, I always figure there must be somebody somewhere in the world listening to this podcast for the very first time, somewhere. So welcome along. Let's show you what we've got. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are listening in the world. Welcome to the show. Weekend edition, Sunday 31st of March. My name is Martyn Lee, and I've been through every EV story that I can find today and picked out the best ones to save you time, and we are packed chock full of your answers to question of the week at the end of the podcast today. Hello, Mia. Mia Oppelstrup is a podcast supporter via Patreon, and she increased her support today, and she emailed me just to say a couple of nice things, and I thought it was interesting. I always love to hear from listeners of the show, to hear all about how they use this podcast, and she views her Patreon subscription as something like either a Spotify or a Netflix subscription there. People pay subscriptions to entertainment services as something to do either in their spare time or what they value, and she says that's what this podcast does. She picks things up, she's entertained, hopefully, informed, and in her head, this podcast takes the sort of podcast of Netflix or EV of Spotify position, which is why she's upped her support on Patreon. So thank you very much, Mia, and it's always interesting to hear how different people use this show, so, get in touch. I'd love to hear from you. If you listen on your commute, on your dog walk, at the gym, send me an email. Let me know where you listen. My email address is hello@evnewsdaily.com. And of course, I'll give you all a name check at the end for our exec producers and above. Thank you to myev.com. In the US, they are building a marketplace all about buying and selling EVs, and I do appreciate their continued support to make this show happen. Check them out, myev.com. A bit of housekeeping then from Pete Glass. I mentioned this at the beginning of the show. He's had a tour of the Mini factory where the Mini Electric is going to be built. And I was talking about it earlier on the week on the show. He says, I can assure everyone the Mini EV is being built in the UK. Our EV group booked a tour for 15 of us last week to go around the BMW Oxford plant where the Mini Electric is going to be made. Pete says it's quite amazing, in particular the first construction hall welding the steel pressings together for what's called body in white. It's making 3 body shell types. This is a £500 million investment. There are £150,000 robots going in. The philosophy being there is cell manufacture, not linear production lines. The final assembly is done on long lines with separate cages with clusters of robots doing each bit of the car in different cells. While we weren't allowed anywhere near it, says Pete, they were building the construction cells for the variation required in the Mini Cooper body. Mainly the floor plate and the batteries are going to be held in a T-shape under the back seat and what was formerly the transmission tunnel. Very interesting from Peter, who's had a tour of the Mini factory with his EV group, his EV buddies. Thank you very much, Pete, for that email you sent me a couple of days ago. Well, let's go to Germany, and depending on when you're listening to this podcast, they're either about to or have just banned diesel cars. A ban on older diesel vehicles in the German city of Stuttgart is taking effect April 1st and will include car owners who also live in the city, they said on Thursday earlier this week, following a local court ruling last year. Reports Reuters this week, the city would also ban vehicles not only with Euro 4 emissions, parking in the city or driving into the city, but perhaps with Euro 5 emissions later this year as well. As Kyle Hyatt points out, though, from CNET.com, Euro standards probably mean nothing to my US listeners, so let me explain that. Essentially, Euro 4 encompasses diesel passenger cars from December 2010 and earlier. Euro 5 was January 2011 onwards. Euro 5B ended in December 2013. So you have to have an older car, but if you do indeed have an older diesel, of which there are many in Germany, by the way, you won't be able to drive them into this particular German city, and I expect many more to follow as well. I'll put a link to that story in the show notes. I don't know if you pick up a magazine or two. I do like to read. I like to read magazines. Obviously, I pick up all my news online, but I like to kind of sometimes just kick back and hold a magazine. It's a different experience. I know people have tried to replace books and magazines with Kindles and iPads. I like both. I like sometimes to sit down with a book or a magazine. One of those magazines I used to read religiously when I was younger, but I haven't bought it in a long time, but Top Gear magazine. Obviously the TV show is kind of the halo of the whole thing. People around the world know Top Gear for the telly show, but there's a magazine as well. And this month's special here in the UK, I thought I'd mention it, is all about EVs. And it's interesting when a mainstream magazine like Top Gear dedicates an issue to what they call the electric special. Having a look at the description of the magazine this month, they say that electric cars are no longer the future of motoring, they are already part of the mainstream. And what better way to prove this than a feature run solely on EV? This month's Top Gear magazine, out now, takes an in-depth look at two cars trying to make battery power cool. At one end of the spectrum, we look at the Honda E prototype, a little city car with boxy styling and 6 interior screens. And at the other end of the scale, there's the Pininfarina Battista, a 1,900 brake horsepower electric hypercar from the famous Italian design house. Further proof that speed freaks will be catered for in the EV world. We also ask our man Paul Horrell to answer 4 of the biggest questions around ownership of EVs. How green are they? Where will electricity come from? Can I have one if I live in a flat or an apartment? Find out all the answers in the new edition of Top Gear magazine. And so I thought I'd give them a plug. I'm not in the business of selling magazines, but when they devote an issue to electric cars, I'm more than happy to give them some airtime. Moving on to BMW. And the BMW i3 is a car that many people really love, but what about the successor of the i3? It can't go on forever, and we have heard recently on the podcast, I've told you, that BMW have confirmed they won't be releasing new models of the i3. Well, aside from being BMW's first all-EV, the i3 was really special because of its custom carbon fibre construction, something usually associated with Formula One cars or high-dollar sports cars, not a small city car. Well, building the i3 with so much carbon fibre seemed like a great idea for weight saving, but it really did cause production issues for BMW early on, I would say. They nailed it after a while. Carbon fibre is expensive, and it's what's really, if you look at the i3's high price, even used cars, by the way, holding on to their price really well, it's because you are driving space-age technology that normally million-dollar hypercars have, all that carbon fibre. Carbars.com says that if BMW does build a second generation, it's going to be on conventional lightweight materials like steel and aluminium. We know BMW plans to release 12 new EVs by 2025. It's going to be interesting to see if a next generation i3 ever makes the cut. It's more likely to be. Manager Magazine says it's going to be called the i2, signifying it's going to be cheaper than the current i3. Around the same size, though. The i2 is slated for 2024, starting price of €30,000, that's $33,000, and of course it won't have any of that high-tech carbon fibre as they look to make more money. Let's move on to used EVs. Do you drive? I drive a used EV. I've never bought a new car in my life. I'd love to one day. I'm too much of a tightwad. There's a different version of that word, which I won't say because I'm keeping it clean. But I am, because, you know, having a new car is just the best feeling, isn't it? It's the smell, it's that feeling of driving out of the forecourt, or maybe you're leasing it, of course, but, you know, leasing companies aren't charities. They all have employees and staff, and so you are paying for those as well, even if you're leasing a car. I know the monthly payments are small, so it tricks your brain into thinking you're not spending too much money, but however you get a new car, it's a lovely feeling. But I'm too tight, so I've never owned a new car. I'd love to. Maybe I'll lease one this year. Maybe I'll buy a new one this year. But of course, I've always had used cars and used EVs, and sitting in my driveway was a used Renault Zoe that we were out in today. Electric cars are becoming more and more prominent in the automotive world. The demand for small electric cars is increasing, says Dominic Wilde for Motor1.com, UK edition of Motor1. Models are even increasing in value according to the experts at the automotive data company, which is called CAP HPI. It says that some owners could even buy an electric car, use it for a year, and sell it for a profit. Now, I was looking at upgrading. We've had the Zoe for this particular one a while now, and I was thinking maybe we'll change it for the bigger battery, 40 kilowatt hour, or maybe just add it. We've got one, maybe I'll have two, maybe a smaller and a larger capacity battery, and so my wife and I have one each. And I was looking at prices of the 40 kilowatt hour and thinking, that'd be nice. Okay, it's not, you know, I haven't got £9,000 in cash lying around, but you know, there's ways and means. And then I was looking at prices of the one that we have, which is the 22 kilowatt hour battery, and I could not find a similar spec to us. Ours is a 2-year-old car. It's done 11 when we bought it. It's done 14,000 miles now, and I just couldn't find anything for the £5,900 we paid last year. All of the prices at least £1,000 more for the small Renault Zoe, and that's with the battery lease, by the way. We pay £50 a month on a battery lease, and I think we got a stellar deal last year. Not that I bargained hard. In fact, I didn't even bargain the price down, because the price was $5,900, and I thought, that's fine, I'm happy with that. I didn't want to go into a long protracted negotiation for something that I already knew at the time was below market value, and it was less than I was willing to pay, and I want to get the deal done quickly. I mean, like within half an hour. I was like, here is the money, I'm paying, let me drive it away now. And they were like, well, you can have it in a couple of weeks, we'll get someone to clean it. No. Sell me a car. And so I knew I was getting a stellar deal. Maybe I could have got another £100 off perhaps, but I wasn't in that place. And so it's interesting, if you have an EV, maybe go online, maybe go on myev.com, have a look at the used prices on myev.com, if you're in the US anyway, and just have a look at what the prices are doing. Now, that article was for UK prices, but I'd love to know different markets around the world. Here in the UK, by the way, the top 3 cars that have gone up in value in the last 12 months. Number 1, the Nissan Leaf. Number 2, the Renault Zoe. Mine. Number 3, the Mitsubishi i-MiEV, or the i-MiEV, which is the little tiny one that's been around forever now, but going up in value. I think people are adding them to their driveway rather than selling their fossil car. I think people are making I don't know, this is gut feeling, by the way. They're buying small, cheap city cars and adding them to see what they don't like about EV. I'd love to know your stories. Maybe it's a future question of the week. Let's move on to Tesla batteries. They've completed their largest battery storage installation in Asia. In Osaka in Japan, the 4.2 megawatt or 7 megawatt hour facility uses 42 Tesla power packs installed in just 2 days following their arrival on site, says Kling Technica today. Well, the customer is Kinsetsu Railway. They've electrified trains on 300 miles of track. Many of the tracks pass through tunnels, difficult for rescuers if there's a power outage. The Tesla batteries now provide enough power to stranded trains to operate for up to half an hour, enough for them to exit tunnels and reach the nearest station, says Ars Technica. A report by Bloomberg New Energy Finance 2 days ago says the benchmark levelized cost, bear with me, this is a bit jargony, the benchmark levelized cost of electricity, lithium-ion batteries, has fallen 35% since the first half of last year. Bear with me on that. The benchmark levelized cost of electricity for lithium-ion batteries has fallen 35% to $187 per megawatt hour in the first half, since the first half of 2018. That's a heck of a drop for the cost there. Well, for the electricity for lithium-ion batteries. BNEF analyst Eleanor Giannakopoulou says that looking back over the decade, there's been staggering improvements in the cost competitiveness of low-carbon options thanks to technology, innovation, economies of scale, stiff price, competition of manufacturing and experience. And while we're talking about the actual cost of batteries, the production cost of batteries, then Elon Musk is on record as saying that Tesla can now make $100 per kilowatt hour for making the batteries, and that's at cell level, not much more for pack level, and so even the cost to produce the things is going down as well. Moving on to New York City, and 15 new electric buses are heading there. The new Flyer Excelsior electric buses, according to InsideEVs.com. The New York City Transit is expanding its EV fleet with 15 low-floor, 60-foot-long buses. The latest order includes 16 fast chargers as well. They charge at 150 kilowatts. They're from Siemens. And the battery power is from Exalt Energy. Well, the order supports the efforts to develop a cleaner, greener public transportation footprint, which focuses on building greater environmental sustainability, they say, reducing emissions and modernising the bus fleets. Every bus is going to leverage a business analytics tool to optimise the performance and operations of the buses. They've got long-range and heavy-duty lithium-ion batteries. They're going to run 24/7 as much as they can, obviously stopping for charging. And the award includes new Flyer buses for the city. There's 15 of those, 16 chargers, and it is good. It's good, but this is good. I'm not being negative, but let me read you one of the comments of Inside EVs, and this does sum it up. One of the commenters, who is DIM, D-I-M, says this: It's good news, as each electric bus will displace at least as much oil as 30 electric cars. Even a small order of 15 buses has the effect of 450 cars being taken off the road. When a city like Shenzhen in China is switching to 16,000 electric buses, it displaces the same amount of oil as 480,000 electric cars. That's 5 years worth of production at Tesla's 2017 levels and about 140% of their last year levels. Focusing political pressure on switching our cities to EV buses has significant results, and I couldn't agree more. This is a phrase that I picked up from Tony Seba. Not necessarily how many vehicles you change to EV, but how many miles you change to EV. Let's moving on to staying with Tesla-ish. Moving on to Apple. Earlier this month, Electrek reported on Tesla losing its VP of engineering. The gentleman behind its latest electric power chains, Michael Schwekutsch, I think is his name. We described, says Electrek, his departure from Tesla as a big loss for the company, since he's almost the most experienced engineer that has brought electric powertrain programs to the market, not just at Tesla but the industry. And Fred says, now Electrek, we learn that separate sources, he's joined Apple's special project group. It includes the Cupertino Company's Project Titan division. That's their EV project. We think maybe it's their self-driving thing that Apple are doing. The latest of several top Tesla engineers to join the project, for a time thought to only consist of self-driving systems for vehicles. After scaling back the plan now, with him moving over from Tesla, basically Tesla's top engineer, to go to Apple working on electric powertrains, it surely becomes clear the company plans to bring electric vehicles to market at some point in the future. Right, let's go on to our question of the week. And it was a brilliant question this week. We were saying that if EVs are indeed going to cost a premium over fossil cars, how much of a premium are you willing to pay? We'll start off with the emails. David Nye says maybe 20% extra would be okay for a decent battery size, maybe 25% more. A good example is the Kona, and it fails the test miserably. At the top of the range, fossil Kona is 43,000 Aussie dollars if you do, before hard bargaining by the way. The equivalent Kona EV is $70,000 on the road, a markup of 59% or more over its fossil car. I see what you mean, David. Thank you very much. Hello to Daria, or Daya. I think I pronounce your name Daya. Thank you very much for saying I've been listening to your podcast in California for the last 3 months and I love it. My wife and I own the Chevy Volt. You are correct when you say that Volt owners love their car. I always say this. I've never heard from a Volt owner that doesn't love their Volt. My response to your question of the week, it comes, in order to come ahead financially, I would be willing to pay $5,000 more after incentives for an EV equivalent to ICE. The reason for this is because I will estimate I'll break even over 5 years of owning the vehicle. Hello to Tim James, who says I'd be prepared to amortise the cost of the EV over 5 years. So, equivalent cost of an EV, calculate it over 5 years, and then I'd pay a 5% premium with things like tyres, servicing, brakes and insurance. And that's Tim James in Australia. He tells me how to pronounce Australia. Ripper. Mark Bungingham is not his name. Mark Buckingham says, it appears I would pay double here in Kiwi land as the Kona EV is double that of the ICE Kona. Yes, someone else from the other side of the world saying that it's very, very expensive. Thank you, Mark. Hello to Andrew Jacobs on email, who says, I'd be willing to pay whatever I can save in 5 years. It's a common topic actually. I don't know how long people own cars for, how long you own a car for, but the common thread seems to be about 5 years. That if you own a car for 5 years, you'd be happy to pay an EV premium because you know that you're going to get that money back at some point. I love the Model 3 so much, I will probably do the Tesla stretch and get it with self-driving. It's a long-term goal though. That car is out of reach for me on prices. Andrew Jacobs, yes, me too. I'm in the same boat as you. Going back to never having bought a new car before, the Model 3 would be a new car purchase. And I don't know what it would be in the UK because the premium models are coming first. £55,000 maybe. Yeah, that's not happening for me. Hello to John Fruith, who says, I'm prepared to pay 50% more for an EV over a fossil car. The total cost of ownership over 10 years is a no-brainer. I save money in the long run, and I get to enjoy the EV smile. Now, that is something that is hard to put a price on, by the way. The EV smile is a thing. It's proven to be a thing. And that's all about when you get in your car, how much do you enjoy driving it? Look, even when you look out the window and you see it there, how much does that make you feel? And you either feel good that you've got it, feel good that you're doing a good thing because you're driving on clean green miles. So that perhaps is more of an intangible. Well, on to YouTube, and Neil says, I drive a Toyota hybrid and I'm looking to buy a full EV. So this is a question that I have been thinking about. I keep a car for 4 to 8 years, depending on how it holds up. I do 25,000 miles a year. I put 200,000 miles on an ICE car with routine servicing. I decided to estimate the cost of ownership over 4 years. Going from my previous car to the hybrid saves £600 a year. My rough guess is that moving to EV, I would save £1,500 a year, assuming petrol prices stay constant, so that's a £6,000 saving over 4 years, plus reduced servicing, reduced road tax, and that number gets larger quickly. Hello to Ashley Hill, who says, I can't give a perceived value here, as since researching into the effects of breathing car exhaust and other pollution, I can't justify purchasing any other vehicle than a full electric car, because I care about the air you breathe. And he says, I might put that on a bumper sticker. I care about the air you breathe. Hello to Zoltan, who says, EVs don't cost more than ICE cars. People listening to this podcast going, yes, they do. He says, they don't cost more than ICE cars. At least the cost of ownership is massively subsidised for gas cars. In 2018, it's estimated that in the US alone, Big Oil and Big Car were the beneficiaries of $1 trillion of subsidies. Compare that to 2017 when it was $800 billion of subsidies going to the oil and big car industry. That's a $4,000 vehicle subsidy per car in just the year. Meanwhile, EV makers get $5,000 a year in zero emissions vehicle credits. Buyers get discounts as well, but only once when you buy it new for the life of the car. Long story short, he says, if we took off all subsidies everywhere, stop subsidising the oil industry, and the purchase price of EVs would be lower than gas cars. Can you imagine doing that? Can you imagine all these fossil cars going up in price, and when there's the outrage, you have to tell people, yeah, the fossil industry is massively subsidised. You didn't know that. Oh, you don't like it now, though, when the price of your car just went up. Interesting point of view. Thank you. And the only person that's pointed that out in a very long time. Hello, finally to Arnis. I will pay 5 years of fuel minus the electricity bill, €2,000 a year. So I would pay a premium of €10,000 if I'm keeping the vehicle for 5 years. Really interesting question of the week this week. Certainly got you the old cogs whirring upstairs. How much more of a premium would you be willing to pay? Now, let me move on to our new question of the week, set by myev.com. Last week, or maybe 2 weeks ago in the US, the clocks changed. Here in the UK, the clocks changed today. Now, if you're an EV driver in the US, when your clocks went, wherever it was, forwards or backwards, you'll have noticed that your car, the clock updated, because EVs are connected cars. In fact, so much so, Teslas know exactly where you are all of the time, and you get those updates over the air. You can connect to your home Wi-Fi, but also they've got SIM cards in, so the cars are constantly connected. All new EVs are going to be constantly connected. The new VW ID range will come with that SIM card inside so that it can do over-the-air updates as well. So here is the question, prompted actually by the clock change a couple of weeks ago in the US, and all those cars updated themselves with the new time, you know, going back, and even these days on your oven clock, you've got to sit down, and used to be VCRs, didn't it? You used to have to change your video time, but now it's just pretty much the clock and an analog watch on your wrist, if you've still got one of those. And it got people thinking, actually, your car updated like your mobile phone or your smartwatch does, but that's because your car's connected. So here's the question of the week. EVs are connected cars, but how much do you think we should value convenience versus privacy? Do you want the person who sold you the car knowing exactly where you go. They will, of course, tell you that data is encrypted and that they don't do anything with that. And you will, of course, know that many, many, many times repeatedly over the years, there's been hacking, there's been data breaches, not of car companies, but even of finance companies and people who are meant to hold credit card data securely, and they don't. So, clearly, we need to ask the question. EVs are connected cars, but how much do you value convenience versus privacy? Even to the point of some people saying, I want to put coins into my charger because I don't mind charging my car, but I don't want someone to know how long I charged it for and who I am. Kind of interesting. Let me know your thoughts, actually. It's a bit of a curveball this week, but I really like it. Thank you to 211 patrons of the podcast, whose generosity means that I get to make this show. And thank you very much to our premium partners, Phil Roberts of Electric Future. That's EF.Energy here in the UK. He does big commercial solar installations. If you're even curious, like I was, you'll want to check out EF.Energy and see what Phil does. And hello to Brad Crosby, who is not promoting anything. He just wants to support this show and the cause and the message that we give. And thank you, Brad, as always, for your continued support. Hello to David Allen, one of the first partners that I ever had. Thank you, David. Hello to OEM Audio of New Zealand and evpower.co.nz. Hello to Sasha Pallenberg and Paul O'Connor, all partners of the show and all massively appreciated. Thank you so much. And all of our executive producers. It's a long list, but I like to read your names out once a week. That's you, Alan Robson, and Alex Banahini, and Alexander Frank, and Harold Gia-Skalsvin, and Ashley Hill, and Björn Fuchstak, and Barry Penniston, and Bob Muir from gingercomputers.com in Dundee, and Borislav Borisov, Brent Kingsford, Brian Thompson, Brian Weatherall, Brian Young, Cesar Trujillo, Chris Benson, Chris Hopkins, Craig Coles, and Craig Rogers. Damien Davis, Darren Bird, Darren Sant, Dave Jewson, David Barkham, David Finch, David Partington, David Prescott, Dirk Rutsatz, and Don McAllister of screencastsonline.com. Enrico Stefan Schillo, Frederick Rovek, George Clargo, Jack Oakley, James Storr, Jason Fan, Jeff Irbies, Jerry Allison, Jill Smith, John Bailey, John Liddell, John Timmis, and Juan Gonzalez, and that's the Jays. Ken Morris, Kevin Mayerson, Kiravan Yam, Lars Dalager, Lawrence D. Allen, Lejek Grzil. Hello to Louis Hopkin, Luke Cully, Marcel Lohman, Marcel Ward, Martin Croft, Matt Piccioni. Hello to Matthew Ellis, Matthew Gruby, Maz Shah, and Mia Oppelstrup, Michael Pastroni, Mike Rogers, Mike Winter, and Nathan Gore-Brown. Hello to Neil E. Roberts and all of the gang at Sussex EVs. Hello to Paul Seeger-Smith, Paul Stevenson, Pete Glass, Philippe Mouchet. Hello to Philippe Calvet, Raj Badwell, Rajiv Narayan, Ralph Jensen, and Renee Schneider. Hello to Rob Cooling, who runs appledriving.co.uk, teaching people to drive in EVs. Hello to Rod James, Rupert Mitchell, Sarah McCann, Scott Callahan, Seiki Payne, Steve John, Stuart Hanna, The Limousine Line in Sydney, Walter McVeigh, and Zach Hurst. Well, there are 430 previous episodes of this show online for free, but as for the new ones, why don't you get them first and free and automatically by hitting subscribe in your chosen podcast app. I get it on all the platforms like iTunes, TuneIn, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, YouTube, iHeart, the blog, there's Patreon. Hit subscribe and then you get the shows first and free and automatically. In the meantime, come and say hi on the socials. If you search for EV News Daily, you'll find all of my places. Have a wonderful day. I will catch you tomorrow. And remember, there is no such thing as a self-charging hybrid.